Last month, one of Britain's largest dairy companies launched a campaign backed by their own research, arguing that the rise of veganism among young people is responsible for the dairy industry's increasing precarious condition. Titled "Don't Cancel the Cow," the campaign suggested that people's choices not to consume dairy are ill-informed and argues for the need to balance the conversation when it comes to food and the health of our planet. Now, my first guest tonight, and this is a topic very close to my heart, is Liam Keogh, who's here to talk up all things vegan. Liam, thanks for doing this. I'll say from the top, you're not actually a vegan, but you're in favour of that as a choice.
Yeah, so I guess I'd class myself as a flexitarian, and I advocate for the vegan industry. I think it's an incredible part of the economy, employs a lot of people, generates millions of pounds, and there is a section of the community and society and the media who wants to disparage it, but I think that's a shame, because actually we're a world leader when it comes to vegan food, and we should celebrate that.
What about, though, the push towards highly processed vegan food? I mean, I am all in favour of the mighty vegetable and fruit, and I would see all of those products celebrated for what they are: seasonal, grown locally, you know, not flown in from thousands of miles away. Eat what grows in your patch and have it for what it is. What about all this heavily processed so-called plant-based food, plant-based sausages, plant-based burgers? Why does the industry go that way?
I think there's a huge diversity in the industry. I think, yeah, sure, there's a lot of heavily processed stuff, as you will find in all elements of the food and drink industry. Consumers tend to like that. But actually, Do they? Is that what they want?
Well, I mean, processed food?
Yeah, I mean, you only need to look at the sales of heavily processed stuff to know that it's popular. However, actually, the vegan industry, the plant-based movement, has been at the forefront of saying, you know, we need to have a cleaner ingredient profile. There are lots of brands doing really, really great work in that regard. But look, the plant-based industry is in its infancy, so it's not necessarily at the stage yet where it's at the final level of evolution. So yeah, sure, there's probably brands that need to improve their ingredient profile, need to get better, need to go back to the core of what the product is, which is vegetables. But, you know, the vegan industry is diverse. There's a huge range there.
Is it fair that it rides shotgun with the notion of saving the planet? You know, when, say, the mass production of seed oils and, you know, and the wholesale production of avocados and other products is demonstrably deleterious to the ecosystems and the environment, and, you know, and takes a toll on animal life and all the rest of it, and yet it succeeds in badging itself as saving the earth?
I think the vegan industry's done very well to claim that mantle. And look, the food and drink industry needs to focus on being as environmentally friendly as possible. We all live on this planet. We want it to be around for a very long time for future generations. I personally think it's a red herring. Frankly, it's not going to have a tremendous impact on the environment, whether you have dairy milk or plant-based milk. The reality is a lot of the environmental issues come from the very top 1%. There was a report out the other day that said if we just halved the number of private jets in this country, we'd meet our net zero emissions. So, look, I think if the vegan industry is driving forward the food and drink market in general to be more environmentally friendly, fantastic. But I think there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of other benefits to it.
Laura, what do you think? You've got a lot of, you know, quite involved interests and an inquiring mind around the food that we eat. What do you make of the rise of veganism and its impact?
I think it's always been around, and it always will be. I mean, think about how many religions encourage it as well, you know, in Buddhism. But in a way, I think of it as being like that. It's such a strong ideological belief. It's almost like a religion. What I don't like is when there's kind of a push to impose it on people, like having meat-free days in canteens at schools or in public buildings. I think there's a bit of a top-down effort to push it onto people under the guise, at least, of there being an environmental benefit. Which, like you say, is probably a bit of a red herring, because it's so much more complicated than that. Having vast monocultures of almonds can't possibly be better than having some local milk from cows. I do worry about it being pushed onto young people as a healthy diet, because it's almost impossible to get a nutritionally complete vegan diet for young people growing up. I mean, there's a new cohort of scientists, it's 1,000 of them, come together under the banner called the Dublin Declaration, who said that we shouldn't be pushing veganism too hard because livestock agriculture is so important for the environment, but also for nutrition. I mean, there are billions of people around the world who would be eating more meat and dairy and be healthier for it if only they could afford it.
What do you think of that, Liam? The idea that because it also pushes this hyper healthy profile of veganism, when there's definitely, demonstrably, scientifically, especially for youngsters, very young, it's problematic in them acquiring the necessary nutrients.
Yeah, I mean, I would challenge that. I think it's untrue, actually, that there is a top-down push towards veganism. The reality is the government supports the dairy and meat industry to the tune of millions of pounds a year. Rightly or wrongly, I think that's a good idea. Public Health England pushes the dairy consumption in its diet, and also, you know, we have free milk at school, subsidised milk at school. So I don't really take that argument. Is it healthier? Yeah, sure. There's loads to recommend a vegan diet. There's loads to recommend a flexitarian diet. But actually, you know, you can argue it on both ways. I think the reality is when it comes to food and drink, you just need to be moderate. You need to be balanced, and you do need to know the facts yourself a little bit and read into it.
So if it's not better for the planet, and if it's not necessarily better from a health point of view, what is it good for in terms of something that's being pushed ideologically as somehow morally superior?
Well, I don't believe it's being pushed by any particular department. I mean, if you compare the size, for example, of the vegan industry and the dairy and meat industry, like dairy meat billions, vegan is millions. There's no push from government to really enforce it and wipe out dairy and meat. That's just fantasy.
Isn't that because not many people want it? I mean, plant-based foods are coming out of supermarket shelves because they're not selling.
Well, I just think the reality is that the dairy and meat industry is massive. They employ loads of people, and the government supports them. And the vegan industry is in its infancy. I think it's fantasy to pretend that the government is somehow undermining traditional farming or dairy or meat to advance vegan. Now, look, obviously, you can argue that it's good for the environment. You can argue that it's good for health. My take on it is that it's just fantastic to have lots of choice. And actually, you know, what's really, really good is that the vegan industry is bringing more competition into the industry. That means better quality, better pricing, better choice for consumers. And if the meat industry and the dairy industry are struggling because veganism is promoting themselves as healthier, as better in the environment, then actually that's a really good incentive for them to improve in those areas as well.
Laura, would you contemplate such a lifestyle change?
No, I can say hand on heart, I could never be vegan. Definitely not. I have tried being vegetarian a few times, more when I was younger because I felt sorry for animals. I have to say I'm now much more at peace with eating animals. I think it's the natural human diet and I'm okay with it. And I put my money where my mouth was recently. I chose to dispatch my own food. I thought, you know, am I so comfortable eating meat because I'm just picking it up wrapped in cellophane from a supermarket? If I had to kill, butcher and eat the meat, could I do it? You know, could I do field to fork? And so I tried it, and I went to a small holding, and a couple of farmers let me, they trained me to dispatch a quail, and I butchered it and ate it, and also a turkey. And I have to say it was quite hard, especially the quail. It felt very visceral and quite emotional.
What about the feeling of then consuming something whose life you had brought to a close? Was there a difference?
There was a difference. I felt worse about the quail, and I think it's because it was so very small, and the way I had to dispatch it was... This is going to sound really, I think, shocking for people, but the traditional method of killing little birds is cervical dislocation, and with a small animal like a quail, on a small holding of that size, you would simply pull the head off. It's too small and wriggly for somebody who's inept to kind of hold it and use an axe. You would risk hurting it more and lose your fingers. And then it was very small. It's really the size of a starter. And so I felt quite a lot of guilt, actually, about taking life for the size of a starter. But I did it. The turkey, no, I didn't really have too much difficulty with it. I mean, I felt extremely responsible for making sure both birds weren't stressed. And I felt very worried that the turkey was still alive after I dispatched it because the body twitches, but it wasn't. But to be honest, it just looks like food. And I butchered it with the help of the farmer. It's a big animal to deal with, and ate it. And didn't feel guilty about the turkey. That felt a lot more comfortable.
I think
the quail was harder.
I think it's very appropriate that you did what you did. I doff my metaphorical cap to you.
We just need to be aware that, you know, meat, when it comes from wrapping off a shelf, was an animal. I think it's okay to eat it. And I wouldn't say everyone should go out and kill animals, but it's just being aware of where it comes from.
Liam, thank you for really balanced offering concerning the
Thank you
vegan
very
lifestyle.
much.
Thank you very much for that. It was a really open-minded and honest depiction of that. So, going to a break now, after which I'll be joined, hopefully, by a dairy farmer from Pembrokeshire who says the vegan movement has caused untold damage to his farm and business. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. Before the break, we heard from Liam Keogh about the benefits of veganism. But what impact does the push for all things plant-based have on established farms and communities? Well, let's ask Pembrokeshire farmer Steve Evans. Steve, are you there?
I am here.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for joining me. What kind of farm do you run?
We run a mixed business, predominantly dairy cows. We also grow some cereals, some wheat, some barley, some maize crops as well. We are in a rotation with a large-scale vegetable grower who grows cauliflowers, cabbage, leeks, carrots, potatoes, and we work through and through. It's so we're a multi-spur business then, should we say?
Now, my previous guest who was advocating veganism, was suggesting that it was very small and, compared to dairy and meat and livestock production, that it was a very slight presence. But you're obviously finding it has a significant impact on what you're about.
It's interesting, and I appreciate his open-mindedness earlier on, because it's like, from my side, I'm totally open-minded, because at the end of the day, we're a mixed business, so we have opportunities to clip the ticket, if you like, via multiple sources. The vegan market hasn't really hit the dairy industry per se. What is hitting farmers' confidence in particular is the amount of misinformation out there. We are deemed as Satan for the environment. We've been farming for a millennia. I'm fourth generation on our farm. There is so much misinformation out there about food choice, about dietary advice, and farmers are generally pretty sick and tired of it. That is our greatest challenge, is actually countering the misinformation, dealing with the huge cost of production rises we faced over the last year. So the biggest threat to our business isn't from veganism per se, because at the end of the day, it only represents sort of 4 or 5% of the market share. We've had Kantar statistics over the last number of years have shown the veganism in particular has been pretty consistent in percentage terms of the population. Yes, there are more vegans. Yes, because the population's growing. Yes, there are more meat eaters because the population's growing. So is veganism a massive threat to the industry? No.
When you talk about misinformation, that's your major problem. What would be your biggest bugbear? What are you sick and tired of hearing levelled at your industry that you would say is demonstrably false?
The biggest one that it brings a smile to my face quite often is there was a report, an Oxford report used or compiled a few years ago, and it seems to be the go-to report in support of veganism across the world. Now, there was no accountancy in that report for water usage. I'm in Pembrokeshire. We get 2 metres of rain a year, yet they classify dairy as a water hog. Well, we can grow grass for fun here. We don't need to irrigate. We're on borehole water for drinking water. We have to use mains water, granted, for washing, milking equipment, things like that. But we are not water hogs. There's an interesting one as well, is around nitrogen use. And cows can harvest their own grass, they can spread their own manure, and grass will grow again. That's all we need is what's coming out of the air, you know, in terms of moisture. So there is no, because of the way that study was compiled, there was no regional sort of acceptance. It was all put into one basket, right? Agriculture,
Steve,
livestock farming.
Bear with me while I bring in my studio guest, Laura Dodsworth. Sure. Laura, what do you think is driving it? I mean, even Liam said, you know, that it wasn't about the environment particularly per se. Why would you say that the traditional industry is being demonised? Steve used the word Satan. You know, if it's not truly about the environment, what is it about?
I don't believe what Liam was saying. I think he said it in good faith. But we do know that there are targets to reduce meat and dairy consumption.
But why?
That are set out by, you know, the UN or...
But why? If it's not... I mean, but Steve's contending there that it's not having that, you know, that dreadful impact on the environment. And if he is right, what else would be the motivation for taking away the dairy and the meat industry? Because
people have got their head in the clouds about it. You know, talking about scientists in labs and behavioural scientists and technocrats thinking that they can make these big sweeping decisions for for the globe. But of course, different parts of the world are different. Pembrokeshire is basically God's own country, and just let the cows and the livestock and the farmers do what they're good at.
Steve, what will happen to the environment of Pembrokeshire if there was to be the demise of the kind of traditional land management that you're an integral part of?
There was a former DEFRA minister posted on Twitter. He was abroad. I think he was in Romania. He posted a short video of how beautiful the scenery was. I called out his BS and I said, you could be in Pembrokeshire. And I shared a video on my Twitter account of Pembrokeshire. Beautiful woodland, beautiful grass, cattle out grazing, absolutely beautiful, beautiful place to be. What would happen in Pembrokeshire in particular? I mean, Neil, you've been to Pembrokeshire, you filmed down here in the past. Mm-hmm. You know, you're fully aware how beautiful it is down here. But it would rapidly... It wouldn't go back to the temperate rainforest that they claim Pembrokeshire has. It would become bracken, brambles. Yes, biodiverse, of course, but it would be an eyesore. Within 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
But the problem isn't that. It isn't the eyesore. Isn't the issue? It's where the hell does our food come from?
Absolutely. Steve Evans, I can't agree more. The very thought, that you raise the spectre of Pembrokeshire becoming an eyesore, I find an unbearable concept. And yes, where is the food supposed to come from without people like yourself?
If I could just jump in, Laura made the point there, you know, and we're talking about what is driving this. Yara, a fertiliser company, are opening up a new fertiliser plant shortly in the UK. Great, wonderful. Let's secure fertiliser supply. What makes fertiliser? Fossil fuel. Who is the CEO of Yara? Petter, what's his name? I do apologise. Stordeland, who is one of the key players in the Eat Lancet organisation. And what have they been advocating? They've been advocating veganism, plant-based diets. So he is quite happy to sit there as CEO of Yara to produce fertiliser of fossil fuels to sell to us, the farmer. You know, we use non-organic fertilisers here. We use artificial fertilisers. He is quite happy to sell it to us. Well, that's a financial decision. That isn't anything to do with the environment. That is purely financial. So he needs to make up his mind, along with his good lady wife, what on earth they actually want.
It's a conversation that needs to keep going. Steve Evans, Pembrokeshire, thank you very much for your time this evening.